Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Liz Loves Books. Today I'm going to be bringing you my June wrap-up. I read so many library books. I only have 2 physical books here that were on my TBR that I've read, and one of them was a reread and one was a nonfiction, so it's very random. But let's just get started. The first book that I read in the month of June was Warriors Into the Wild by Erin Hunter. This was a reread, just a nostalgic reread of a book series that I loved when I was in elementary school and middle school. There are so many different series and iterations of this story now, but this is the first original series called The Prophecies Begin. And it's a middle grade fantasy with talking cats. Like, what more could you want? And so basically this one, it's super short. I read it on the 1st of June in one day, and it follows a little orange tabby cat named Rusty who decides to kind of venture into the forest behind his owner's house, and he gets brought into Thunder Clan, which is one of the 4 clans in the area of wild cats, and they all have their own different clans and different roles in their society basically. And Thunder Clan is in a lot of danger from Shadow Clan, who are trying to encroach upon their territory, and there is a prophecy that is going around saying that only fire can save the clan. And they find Rusty, who is orange like fire, and they assimilate him into their clan, and it's just kind of the cats' journeys and trying to live their lives. And it's actually kind of intense for a middle grade. There's some death in here and really intense stuff, and it was just really fun and nostalgic to reread. Give it 4 stars. Very fun. And then the second book that I read was Who's the Dead by T. Kingfisher. It is a horror novella that is based off of the story The House of Usher. Now, I think I did this book a disservice because I went into it, I didn't know anything about The House of Usher. So the whole time I was reading it, I was just confused. I gave it 3 stars because of the writing itself. But enjoyment, it was probably more like a 2. I had never felt something be so drawn out, considering it was a novella. So I think it was more of a me thing than the book. But I can't even really tell you what it's about because I don't remember. So that was the second book that I read in June. So that was an unfortunate flop, but that's why sometimes those kinds of stories I get from the library or KU, just because I don't know if I'm going to like it enough to want to have it. And I'm also wondering if T. Kingfisher is an author for me, because I also read A Sorceress Comes to Call, their release from last year. I gave it a 3. I didn't really enjoy it very much. I feel like the only books by T. Kingfisher that I might really like is the Paladins series. I think there's 4 books. That's more of historical fantasy rather than fantasy retellings of other stories. So I might try those at one point from the library and see if they are interesting or not. But yeah, I gave that one 3 stars. Next, I read Heavenly Bodies by Imani Ariu, and that is the first book in a new fantasy romance series. And this was my favorite book of the month. I gave it 4 stars. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. I read the physical copy that I had, which was a Fairy Loot edition. I did end up selling it on Pango Books just because I felt like I didn't need the special edition. And I think I decided that a little too early because nearing the last half of the book, I liked it a lot more than I did the beginning. So a little bit of regret there, but that's okay. I can always maybe just get the traditional paperback if I feel like it for my bookshelves. But I will be continuing on in the series. It is I would say new adult fantasy romance, because there is a little bit of spice on the page, but it's not super descriptive. And this book took me through a lot of different emotions. In the beginning, I was like, okay, yeah, this is really good. I'm really intrigued. And then as I read a little bit further in, I was starting to get a little bored, a little confused with trying to keep track of all of the different characters, because this is based off of the zodiac. So there was a bunch of different kings and queens and gods and rulers that were all based off of that. So I was kind of confused after a while, and I kept having to go back to the information glossary, which I know that's what it's there for, but sometimes that can get frustrating. And then that's when I decided to sell my Fairy Loot copy on Panko because I knew somebody else would really, really want it. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a 3-star. Meh. And then as I read further and further, I got a little bit more invested in our female main character and our male main character and their relationship. But then, like, the last, 20% of the book, there was just twist after twist after twist after twist. I guessed the first twist, but then I didn't guess that there was going to be a twist because of the twist that I guessed. If that makes sense. So that bumped it up right up to like a 4-star. It is interesting though that it is my favorite book of the month because it did kind of start off a little shaky. So overall, like, June itself wasn't the best reading month ever, but that makes sense because May was such a good reading month for me. I had 3 5-stars. So, you win some, you lose some. But then the next book that I read is called Over My Dead Body by Sweeney Boo. It is a YA graphic novel. Just a standalone one. I was looking for one to complete for a sightseeing prompt for a readathon that I was participating in June. And this was just a really fun little kind of mystery, witchy graphic novel about these girls that were set in a school. I'm not sure if it was like a high school or like a college kind of setting, but it was a school setting. And one of the friends disappears into the forest where everyone is not supposed to go because, there's a lot of dangerous things and witchy things that can happen in there. And it's just the friend of the person that's missing trying to figure out what happened and the reason behind her friend's disappearance. So I gave that one 4 stars. My graphic novels, I kind of have them on a different rating system than my fiction, physical, actual books. I have it on it's a little bit less intense of a scale. If I give a graphic novel a 3-star, I still really, really enjoyed it. Versus a typical book, 3 stars means it was kind of I liked it, but it wasn't anything that great. But yeah, so that is the next book that I read in June. And then after that, I read a nonfiction, and I read Taylor Swift by the book The Literature Behind the Lyrics from Fairy Tales to Tortured Poets by Rachel Feder and Tiffany Tetroe. This was one of the books I got for Christmas last year from my fiance Brian. He got me a couple different Taylor Swift nonfiction books. And this one is really cool because it talks about every single album that she has done so far and different lyrics and how they relate to different poets, writers, historical events, things like that. And each era they put in a certain description, and they have some of the song lyrics and descriptions of what they were based off of, or actual inspiration that Taylor came from it. Also had a lot of a fun glossary in the back page for really extreme literary words that a lot of people don't know or needed. So that was really, really helpful. And there was also just a lot of really beautiful watercolor art in here as well at the beginning of each era's. A lot of beautiful ones. And they also, in each era's section, had, if I can bring it into here, they had the Swifties Guide to Tortured Poets and popular poets and writers that fit the era of whatever album they were talking about. And then it also talked about if you love an album, if you love folklore, you should read this set of books. And then there was also a motif playlist, so there's playlists for a lot of these eras, so I was able to put those into my Spotify, which was really fun. I didn't rate this. I usually don't rate nonfiction like this, but it was really enjoyable, and I was really glad that I read it. Next, I read a book that is called The Unsettled by Ayanna Mathis. This was a historical fiction that took place in the 80s. I had this on my TBR for forever, and it fit a prompt that I needed for the readathon I participated in. And I did read it all the way through. I gave it 3 stars. I was just kind of bored throughout it. I understand the purpose the author had with writing it, and it kind of followed 2 different timelines, one of a daughter and one of the mother. The daughter lived in Philadelphia, and the mother lived in a really, really small kind of backwoods town in, I believe, Louisiana or Georgia, one of those. And I was excited to read it because it followed a full cast of like POC characters and just kind of talking about like the Black experience. And so I kind of don't like that I gave it 3 stars. It's just, I feel like it was just a little too long, and I liked the first half a lot more than the second half. The second half is where it really, really lost me. I can't really explain why it did. It just did. It wasn't as engaging or interesting in the second half as it was in the first half. So 3 stars for that one. And then I also read another graphic novel that was called The Witch Boy by Molly Knox Ostertag. I've read a couple graphic novels by them, and this was just a really cute middle grade graphic novel about a boy named Aster and a lot of his family, his mother, his father, his grandmother, his cousins, aunts, and uncles, and how they all kind of lived in a forested area on like the cusp of like a bigger city, and they're a magical family. The girls are witches, and then the boys are shapeshifters. And Aster is our male main character, and he wants to be a witch instead of a shapeshifter. So it follows a lot of like kind of those like gender norm issues that are really important nowadays, knowing that like, oh, boys can only do this and girls can only do that when they can easily flip-flop and it's not that big of a deal. So it has that kind of storyline as well, which is interesting. But it also follows a mystery storyline because some of his male cousins have been disappearing in the forest. Oddly enough, similar to Over My Dead Body, which I talked about earlier. So that's kind of fun. And I'm not going to give away like the main reason as to why because it'll ruin the book. But it's super short. I read it in one sitting and one day. It was super short and sweet and cute. And I give it a 3.5 star. Then next I reread God Killer by Hannah Kaner. I read that as an ebook from my library because I wanted to reread it because I want to continue on in the series because there's 2 more in it. And I gave this one 4 stars. I liked it just as much as I did the first time that I read it. And God Killer follows a couple different POVs. There's 4 POVs in the first book at least. It follows Kisena or Kissen. She is our God Killer. Her job is to kill gods that are popping up around the whole country because the world doesn't want gods anymore, and so she's trying to eradicate them. Then it also follows Elogast, who is a retired knight who was under the king's command, and he is now kind of taken a step back from that world and kind of gone to a smaller city and has become a baker. And he gets kind of wrapped up within Kissen's storyline, but as well has his own storyline because he is one of the best friends of the king of this whole area. His name is Aaron, and he is going on a quest to try to help his friend because his friend has a curse on him and he is pretty much dying, so Elagast is trying to find a cure for him. Then it also follows a young noble girl who's around 12 years old, I think, and her name is Inara. And she is of a royal household, the Crier household, and she gets caught up with Kissen early on and then Elagast a little bit later on in the book because the manor of her house has been burned down. And so she's just trying to escape whoever has tried to kill her and her entire family. And then we have the last POV, which is a really fun one, and his name is Skedi Seth, but they call him Skedi. And he is a minor god who is attached to Inara, our young noble girl. They have no idea why they are attached to one another, but they can't travel too far away from each other, otherwise it's physically painful for them. And so they are both trying to find people like Elagast and Kissen to help them on their quest to find a way to detach from one another so that Skedi can have his own life and Inara can have hers. Of course, this causes a little bit of a problem because Kissen is a god killer, so her goal is to try to kill all these gods, no matter how small. And Skedi is a god of white lies, so he doesn't seem super like harmful or anything, and so Kissen doesn't do anything because she doesn't want to hurt Inara, who she kind of sees as like a younger sister. And this is just all about like a little found family dynamic. There's a lot of really good representation in it. Kissen is kind of described as a little bit more of like a androgynous character. Elagast is a POC character, and Kissen also is missing a limb and has a prosthetic leg. So you have some of that representation there too. And I just think it's just a really unique story. And I'm excited to continue on in book 2, which is Sunbringer, which I'm hoping to read this summer. Then the next book that I read was another continuation in a series, and I read the 3rd book in the Graceling series by Kristin Cashore, and this is called Bitter Blue. I listened to it on audio. It's a really good audio series for me, and it's an older series. I don't remember when I started listening to it. I think I started it last year, and I just found it on Libby, and I was like, this seems interesting. Again, it's the 3rd book in a series, so I can't say much about it, but it's a continuation specifically from our first book, because our main character in this one, her name is Bitter Blue. She is in that first book. So that's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to ruin anything if you do want to listen or read to it. But I gave the book 4 stars. And lastly, my final book that I've read in June was Prince of the Arena by Elizabeth Helen. This is a novella that is part of the Beasts of the Briar series. Now, this was just released this year. It was just an indie published. This whole series is available on Kindle Unlimited. And it is a novella between 2 of our characters that are in the Beasts of the Briar series. Again, I'm not going to talk about it too much because it will spoil the events of book 1. But the authors recommend that you read book 1, then this novella, and then move on to book 2, 3, 4, and then the other books that will be published later on. But this is just a fantasy romance, spicy series, and it was just a really cutesy little novella that took place before the series started. I gave it 4 stars. It was easy. I read it in like a day and a half, about 170 pages. Very, very cute, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, those are the 10 books that I read in June, and I look forward to all the other fun books that I've got on my TBR for July, which you will see very soon. Let me know in the comments if you read any of the books that I read below, or what your favorite book was of June. I'll look forward to seeing you guys in another video soon. Bye, guys.